Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sasquatchers, the paranormal podcast with the punk rock attitude. And we are emphasizing that lately. Uh, we are being.
Who's punk rock here?
We're all punk rock here. We're being super punk. But
Wow.
we have an awesome guest joining us tonight, and we're going to introduce her after that very loud intro that I told her about in 1 second.
Woo! Drew and John on the airwaves, seeking mysteries that can't be explained. Sasquatchers chasing shadows in the night. In the realm of the paranormal they ignite. Sasquatchers podcast pioneers, unveiling the unknown with curious ears. From specters to Bigfoot, they dig deep. Sasquatchers on a quest that's unique.
Wow, it's very loud.
It is very loud. I'm going to have to edit that at some point. But we are being joined tonight by an author who has been on many shows, including with George Norrie several times. And her name is Lynn Monet, and I will let her introduce herself a little further.
Oh, wow. Hi, everybody. And again, Andrew JC, thank you so very much for having me on your show. I've really been looking forward to doing this with you tonight. And hi, everybody. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, same. Yep. Thank you for coming.
If you want to know a little bit about me, I have my 61st birthday coming up in a couple of weeks, actually 18 days. So I'll be 61 in 18 days, and looking forward to that. But with that being said, I have been a nurse for 40 years. 18 of that has been in end-of-life care. I have had the gift of second sight ever since I was a little girl. I've had multiple instances happen, which I'd be happy to share some with you if you'd like, about things that occurred as I was little and growing up and different things like that happened. And I mean, I can start that way if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's start there and kind of get into the second sight stuff and when you were to be kind of cognizant of that.
Okay. When I was a little girl, I was about 5 years old, and my family lived in a house that was just 3 short blocks behind a hospital that was connected to, back in the day, what they called nursing home, and they're now called skilled facilities. And I was in my parents' in the master bedroom, and I was in my mother's jewelry box, and my brother, who was 7, was on the floor playing with his cars. And all of a sudden, I turned to show him how glamorous I had made myself, putting on all of my mother's jewelry. And my brother's fixated looking at the corner of the room, and there was a misting, an ectoplasmic misting, which of course is a portal. And he was fixated on it. So I turned to look to see what he was looking at. And all of a sudden, in that misting stepped in his best friend, John, mother, father, brother, and the brother of John. And my brother gets up and he runs out of the room calling for my mom. I get up running out in the other direction looking for my mom. And of course, my brother finds my mother first, and he tells her, he says, "Mom, John and his family's here." And my mother's like, "Well, I didn't even hear anybody knock." And so she's rushing to come, and he says, "And they're in your bedroom." And she's like, "They're in my bedroom? Who let them in my bedroom?" So they're rushing to the bedroom. She's rushing quickly to usher these people out. And of course, when they came to the room, there was nobody in the room. And my brother got in trouble for that. Since I was born back in the 60s, 1963, having gifts like that was not exactly something that you talked about, because you would literally have the men in white coats pulling up at your door, taking you away to do a lobotomy. So the very next day was the first day after spring break, and my brother was on the bus, and little John was not with him. He usually would sit with him on the bus. And of course, they were classmates, and they sat side by side in the classroom. And when my brother got to the classroom, John was not there. And after they said the Pledge of Allegiance, the teacher stood up in front of the class and said that John would not be returning to class because he and his entire family perished the day before in an auto accident on the way back from wherever it was they were coming from vacation. And it happened the day my brother and I saw them. He came to say goodbye. And that's something that I remember like it was yesterday. Progressing forward, I was 10 years old. I was raised Presbyterian. At 10 years old, my mother took a jaunt with Jehovah's Witnesses, which is a story within itself, but we won't go there. And at 10 years old, because I was still seeing things, I was placed in front of the elders and I was chastised and told that I was possessed, that what I was seeing was demons, all of these things that were wrong with me. I mean, at 10 years old, I was so scared having all of these men sitting around me, telling me all of these things. And so I became afraid of my gifts. And if I continued to see things, but I would run out of the room just as fast as anybody else. It's a ghost, and I would take off with that. But going forward, as a single mother, I purchased a house, which is the story about my first book, Omnipresent, which kind of started everything. Omnipresent is going to end up being a 5-book series. Omnipresent, What Happened Next, Omnipresent 111 Becca Drive is getting ready to come out, and I'm currently writing Omnipresent, No Place Like Home. So with that being said, after purchasing that house that I never moved into, it was that haunted, it was that bad. And, normally people, if there's a ghost or something in their house, they'll call you and they'll say, oh, there's a demon in my house. And 99.9% of the time, it's not a demon. It's a disembodied soul or elemental or something else that's in there. But this house had 2 demons in the house. They were verified, as well as a young man that had hung himself in the house. And like I said, I never moved in. Being in that experience, it allowed me to be able to connect with people of like mind. So I started to realize that I wasn't so odd after all, and that there were other people like me, and I started to connect and enrich my gifts. And of course, my children are empaths as well. So that's kind of how that reopened, and I started to nurture my gifts again. I went ahead and if anybody wants to know, yes, I did sell the house. And yes, I did try to tell the people that bought the house that it was haunted, but they didn't want to hear it. So yes, I did try to do that. I didn't try to just stick it on somebody. The second book, Omnipresent, What Happened Next, is the story about what did happen next. I actually reached out and contacted the family that sold me the house and found out some of the things that were happening to their children in the house. They had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the children were asked to draw pictures of the house that they lived in and their family at school, like they do, in school. And they draw these little stick people, and they drew their family. And next to the picture, they drew these black stick people that had like big teeth and blood coming from them. And then when the teachers and the parents would ask the children who those people, what that was, they said that those are the monsters that live downstairs in their house. So, and that was the house that I had purchased after that. It also goes into sections talking about attachments with schizophrenia and addiction, because I went back to school to further my nursing degree. I also have a degree in biological science. I'm also a licensed death doula. And going through the rotation that I had to go through in the psychiatric wards, I started to see people with attachments on them that were hearing voices, and they were usually disembodied souls. And I also saw these backpack-looking creatures that were on the back of people with addiction, which is part of the reason why having those, it makes it so hard for them to overcome their addictions, because they're constantly being taunted by these things who are feeding off of the lush that the addiction creates, or the mental illness creates, and the job loss, the divorce, the loss of kids, the loss of homelessness and things like that. And then 111 Beckett Drive is going to be, it is a story about a townhouse that in transition in a divorce where I had to move from one house to another. I had to stay in this place for a year, and it turned out to be haunted and had a male ghost that was naked. And I've never seen ghosts naked. They usually show up in clothes. I mean, as an end of life care nurse, I saw a lot of people pass away and come out of their bodies. But I would also see their loved ones come in to collect them. And anybody that's galactically inclined, there is a galactic element to it as well. It's all connected. So, but anyway, I just lost my train of thought. What I was saying with that.
Naked ghosts.
Yes, naked ghosts. Thank you. And I have a picture of this. I took it myself. Anyway, I mean, you think about it. If you're passing and your loved ones are coming in to collect you, nobody wants to see mom naked. So you'd be like, oh, please, I'm not coming with you. You got to get some clothes on. You don't want to see your parents naked. So this was the first time I had ever seen a naked ghost, and I have a picture of him. I'll be happy to share it with you. He's standing covering his Johnson in front of a door. I took it myself with my own camera. So anyway, and he was going from townhouse to townhouse, crawling in women's beds and pulling down their underwear in the middle of the night. So that's what that story is about. The Omnipresent, No Place Like Home is a story about a house that I recently inherited. My sister passed away in June, and she was always aware of a presence in the house. We assumed that it was a ghost. She was doing things to protect herself. She lived in Louisiana. I live in South Carolina. So when she passed away, I got to meet the resident in the house, and I, of course, had my son come. We went through the house with all the bells and whistles of what I normally use to clear out that sort of infestation. And I use a fire component. I go through and give them the option to leave. And if they choose not to leave, then they get sucked in the pan because the fire pulls them in and they get stuck in the bottom and something sticky. So that didn't work. This thing was basically mocking me. And it turned out that it was a resident elemental, and an angry one too. And so with that, I've learned so many. Elementals weren't my forte. I mean, that was everybody else's. It's like I'm aware. I've seen aliens. I do. I've smelled Bigfoot. I know how he smells. But anyway, it just and in Florida we call him a skunk ape. Same thing. Sasquatch, Bigfoot. It's all the same thing. But so I'm writing a book about elementals and the experience in that house, and how sometimes some of the things, when paranormal groups go into people's homes to clear them and they can't get the things out, it's because they're not disembodied souls, they're elementals. And elementals were created with the earth before religion ever even came into play. So the spiritual things that we normally use to remove things out of a house don't work on these. You have to do something completely different, and they don't leave. So you either have to make friends or you leave, because they're not leaving. So I did also write that. I have 2 other books that are currently out. Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End, which is a book based on my experiences as a death doula and an end-of-life care nurse, palliative care nurse. I saw my mother come out of her body. I have so many beautiful stories about people that are in that state of transition where they come back into their body for that moment of lucidity, and they're talking about babies that they've seen on the other side that aren't born yet, and they talk about seeing their loved ones, and beautiful things that a lot of times the medical field confuses as hallucinations, and they're not. These people, I see what they see. They're actually seeing these things. So I wrote the book to help. It's called Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End, to help take the stigma of death and dying away. And then my other book that I have out is called The Gap, What Else Your Adolescent and Teen Needs to Know. I had a late life baby at 46, so I have a 15-year-old. The 2 in my first book, Omnipresent, are grown. So I had this 3rd child, and she's a straight A student. I'm very proud of her. But I was looking for a book that kind of leaves off where the birds and the bees and kind of picks up with the human trafficking. There's that gap there of things. So I wrote a book talking about things like not going out on a date with stinky sneakers, because if you're in a car with rolled up windows, no matter how attractive you are or handsome you are, smelly feet are not attractive, stinky sneakers. And also what to do if a condom breaks. Not that I'm encouraging children to go ahead and have sex, but if they are having sex and a condom breaks, then they need to know what to do about it. So to protect their future. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That is a lot to unpack. And
Sorry.
no, that's perfect. That's content for us. I'm gonna try to, take my questions chronologically, so I hope I don't forget anything.
Rewind.
I am curious about what it was like. You mentioned briefly, growing up in the '60s and how the whitecoats would take you. How many experiences did you have as a child that you had to keep it because of that stigma? And when, well, I won't say when did that stigma wear off, because you mentioned later on in life you started to embrace it a little bit. But as a child, what's that like, having this second sight, and how many more of these instances have had occurred in that environment where you're still terrified that someone's going to take you away and then lobotomize you just because of this thing that's going on that you have no control over?
Well, I grew up in a haunted house, for one thing. And to us, it was, for my siblings and I, it was commonplace. It was like, there's the toaster, there's the rocking chair, there's a dead person. And so to us, because we lived 3 short blocks behind a hospital next to a nursing home, we would frequently see people in patient gowns walking through our house. We also had Indian mounds on the other side of the hospital. So sometimes we would see Indians. So to us, it was commonplace. And of course, it wasn't supported in the family, but it was only hushed up because, in the sense of not wanting it to get out of the house so that the neighbors would find out. And of course, we didn't understand that as children, why we would need to do that, because it was so commonplace for us. So I grew up, I was not afraid of seeing spirits, because it was something that, like I said, it was commonplace for us. And up until, as I had mentioned, up until about 10 years old, it was okay. I could every once in a while mention it to my mother, and it just so happened that my father's the empath, even more so than my mother, which I found out after the fact. As adults, he came forward and finally admitted that. So that's where we, got the gifts. But I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, you answered the next question too, because I was going to ask if your parents were also gifted, and that's something that seems to be passed down on generation to generation of people. So yeah, you answered that ahead. So they were okay with it. It was just kind of, you were afraid of what the townsfolk would think if it got out.
Well, back in the day, it was about what the Joneses thought. So you had to be in line with what the Joneses thought. And it wasn't that they were in agreement with it. My mother was the one that was more hush hush. My father was an alcoholic. So he dulled his abilities for many, many years until he stopped drinking in order to avoid them. So that's why it took so long for us to find out that he was the one that the gifts came through us from him. So there were some pretty rough times in that house because of some of the ghosts that were in there, and at one point some negative things came into the house as well. So it got interesting as we got older, that's for sure.
When did you first realize you had that gift? Was it when you had seen the family coming through then, or was there a time before then?
And seeing them walking through again, it was commonplace, but having that event yes, happen with John, and the fact that it happened the day that we saw him. And my mother was friends with John's mother. They would sew together. And when we came home, my mother had heard the news too. And of course, she had disciplined my brother the day before for calling her away from doing the laundry to, rush to her room because supposedly there were guests in her bedroom, and that like he was lying or playing a joke on her. So he got in trouble for that because she couldn't see, anything there. And of course they had vanished at that point and kind of faded away. But yeah, that's, so yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
Bringing it back to that scenario where you had seen the family coming out of the portal. So first question I have is, was that portal central to your house in the sense, like, is that something that existed there always, or is that something that just kind of opened up because the family decided they were going to come visit and say goodbye to your brother?
My feeling is that it opened up, that they came to say goodbye. When you're little and you're seeing people in your house that are dead, you don't really know that much about the portals. You don't put that all together. And even the misting was a little bit odd for us at that point, because that's why my brother was fixated on the corner of the room. And then when I looked, it was just different. And we were both getting ready to run out of the room anyway. But then when we saw John stepped in, it's kind of like, oh, well, John's here to play, but then it turned out that it wasn't that. So, yeah. And since then, of course, I have seen portals, like in the haunted house that I did purchase. There were actually verified two demons in the house, and a young man that had hung himself in the house as well. And they made misting portals. And I've since learned that that's called the ectoplasm that they use to travel in and out of.
How did you come to purchase this house? We'll skip ahead a little bit to this house that you feature in Omnipresent. Is this like something that you've like just kind of found on Zillow and you just happened to be this terribly haunted thing, or
Oops.
yeah, how did you come about it?
After all of my conditioning and the fear that was placed into me about ghosts, I started to believe, that's not real, because I'm told, well, there's nothing there. That's not real. And of course I would still be seeing things, but I would, run out of the room. But the thing was, as a single mother, I was looking for a house. I had been looking for a house for a year. And because of my single person income, I didn't have a lot of money to spend. So every place that I would go to that I could afford, either it was, needed a lot of renovations, or maybe it was sitting in the middle of a stinky paper mill, or a dump was down at the end of the street. So, or if I found something decent, I wanted to step back for a week and take time to think about it. And by the time I would come back, it would be snatched up and gone. Mm-hmm. So this particular house, my realtor called me. She said, my colleague has just come back from this house. This house is in your price range and it's almost too good to be true. She said, it's not even on the MLS yet. We need to go and see it. And she mentioned that it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, 2,400 square feet on a half-acre lot in North Carolina. And good luck finding a Florida flat lot in North Carolina. And this one was. So, and it was on a dead-end street. So I rushed over to her office, and she showed me the pictures that had been taken, and I'm looking through them. She's driving us over to the house, and I'm looking through, and I even had her call the other realtor a couple of times, because I'm like, for $132,000, are you sure that this price is right? I mean, it should be a $232,000 back, because this was 18 years ago. In the area that it's in, and the size of how, and it was a brick house, it had 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It had a garage that could have easily fit 3 cars into it, with a workshop if you were to line one up in front of the other and side by side. It had a family room. It had a bonus room. It had a formal dining room, breakfast. I mean, it was a really, really nice house, big double entry doors. It was beautiful home. So I even had or call back the realtor and ask, is there indoor plumbing? Is there is there a sinkhole next door? What is the matter with this house? They're selling it for so cheap. And of course, she had said to me, it is in your price range and it's almost too good to be true. And of course,
Mhm.
that should have resonated because it definitely was. So that's kind of how that started. I fell into it. I as a single mother, I remember going through the house, and I even said a prayer. I said, if this is meant to be my house, I would be thrilled to be able to provide such a grand home for my children as a single mother. And it turned out to be the booby prize. I never moved in, by the way. It was that bad. I never moved in that house.
How many experiences did you have in the house that brought you to that conclusion that you weren't going to move in, and how often did you enter the home before you knew that this was not a place that you were actually going to move into?
Well, the very first day that we went there, the realtor was trying to open the lock. And this is a key piece because the locks were manipulated by a hellhound that would run the stairs coming up. Now, the house is a split level house. So you enter in on a foyer, you have the ascending and descending stairs. And when she finally got the door opened, I walked into the foyer and started to head upstairs to kind of look around while she was fighting to get this key back out of the lock. And as I'm passing, as I said, there being a split level, I could see in my peripheral vision this young man hanging in the stairwell, and I'm like, whoa, what
Wow.
was that? And the house was completely empty. The people had already moved out. The young man hanging himself in the house was verified at a later date by the man who lived next door, who was one of the first houses on the street, even before it was paved, even 20 years before this house was built. He knew the family that built the house, and the son had committed suicide. By his parents were going through a divorce, and he had hung himself in the stairwell. The mother came home from work and found him. So it turned out to be true. So things were kind of happening in the beginning, but I was ignoring it. I was like, no, 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 because I looked directly at it and I wouldn't see anything. And I'm like, well, why would I even be thinking, something about that? And I really wanted this house. I mean, it was a really, really nice house. So I asked the realtor after we had walked through, I'm like, would it be okay if I come back in the afternoon with my children? And she said yes. And so we met at 3:00 and I came with my kids. And of course, they're running through the house, picking out their bedrooms and things like that. And one of the bedrooms was smaller and nobody wanted the small bedroom. So they asked if they could go downstairs. And I said yes. And lo and behold, within like 5 minutes, they were back up. And my daughter, who was 13 at the time, she said to me, Mommy, I do not want to move here. And of course, I'm embarrassed because I'm standing next to this realtor who's been dragging me around for a year, trying to find a place to move. And this house is perfect. And I said, what did you say? And she said, there's something about this house that I don't like and I don't want to move here. So I assumed that she was all of a sudden realizing that we're moving, that she's going to be going to a different school, that she's going to miss out on her friends, not realizing that they're only 25 minutes away. So I told her, I said, well, this decision isn't yours to make. And I should have listened. And I made the bid. And come to find out that somebody else had also ahead of me bid on the house, because after we had gone to see it in the morning, it was then placed on the MLS. And so other people were also looking at it. And so it was between my bid and this other person's bid, and I ended up getting it. So that's how things started. But the very first day that we went to the house, after I got the keys, I'm in the kitchen cooking dinner, and my daughter comes into the doorway of the kitchen and she says, Mommy, what did you want? And I said, I didn't call you. And she said, yes, you did. She said, you called me twice. And I answered you after the first time that I was coming, and then you called me again. And I said, I swear on my life, I did not call you, but I did hear you saying that you were coming, but I thought that you were talking to your brother. So right off the bat, these things have an intelligence about them. They had learned that I was the mommy lady. They knew my children's names. They could mimic my voice at this point. So my son then comes to the kitchen doorway and peers under my daughter's arm and said, "Mommy, I heard you call her too." And of course, I'm rationalizing. I'm like, well, Brittany's a popular name. It's dinner time. We're on a dead end street. Maybe there's another Brittany that lives on the street and her mother was outside calling her to come into dinner. And I'm sure that you're going to meet her and make, friends with her. But so many things happened with the house. My very best friend was clawed to the point of bleeding while she stood next to me in that kitchen. That was one. I couldn't keep workers in the house. I had four workers. Two of them disappeared before 2:00 in the afternoon. One of those never even came back to get paid or get his DeWalt tools. And I tried to call him, and he said that, that there was an issue, that he couldn't come back to finish the floor because I was having wooden flooring laid in there. And just to back up a little bit, I purchased it in March. So since my kids only had like 8 weeks of school left, I wanted them to finish out their school year at their schools, and then they could start fresh at the beginning of the new year, the new school year and their new schools, and they would give them a chance during the summer to meet neighbor kids and stuff so that they, know a few people. So I was going back and forth. But the thing is that in that interim, I had people coming to put down new wooden flooring and make a few modifications to the house that needed to be done. And the one guy with the DeWalt tools, he was the second one that came, and I called him. And at first he said he couldn't come back because somebody was in the hospital. But then he told me to leave his tools outside in a designated area, and they sat there for 2 weeks. And he never showed up. And when I tried to call again, the number was disconnected. So the third person just so happened to be a friend of mine's cousin, and I got to find out what happened to him in the house. And the fourth one was stoned all the time. So he carried my monkey on his back basically anyways of his own, and they didn't bother him. And of course, as long as he didn't, do his thing around my kids, I didn't care. He did good work with painting, and he helped things get finished up. But I'll be happy to share with you what happened to the third person if you'd like.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm enthralled here.
Okay. It was my friend's cousin, and he had come. I was at the house at the same time that he was. He was in my son's bedroom putting down the wood flooring. It was a tongue and groove flooring with adhesive. And he was on a rolling seat, like one of those garden seats. I was in the hallway painting, and all of a sudden I turn, and the way that I see spirits is out of my peripheral vision. I can see them as plain as I see you. I can tell you their eye color if they're close enough, how their hair is fixed, what they have on, everything. When they're in front of me at a distance, they look to me kind of like when you go to the mall and you're approaching like a JCPenney store with the big glass window, and you see the reflection of yourself in that opaque looking image of yourself. That is how I see the ghosts. And when they're close up to me, I see a waffling to the air, like gas fumes or vapors coming off of a hot road. And I might see like a bottom half or something like that. So anyway, I'm standing in this hallway. I'm painting because the carpet's been pulled all out, and he's going to, my friend's cousin, I call him Bobby in the book, is going to be working his way out into the hallway. And I figured, good, I don't need to put a drop cloth. I can paint and make a mess. And when I turned to look at the stairs, there was this young man coming up the stairs. And I mean, he had jeans on. He had on a white Oxford shirt. He had brown hair parted down the middle, penny loafers, kind of 80s style, and had this really, really dark, ruddy complexion, like bad acne to his face. And he was so real that I said, "Did you knock?" I thought it was some disoriented person, or maybe they knocked and I didn't hear them. And of course, Bobby's answering me, no, I might have dropped something. He thought I was talking to him. And then when I looked back, the spirit was gone, but there was that waffling to the air. And I'm like, oh, okay. The lights being turned on and off, the water being turned on and off, you know, the all of the issues with, you know, the drafts in the house and things like that has been created by this ghost. So there's this ghost in the house. But I felt that I could address that, you know, universal law, you can tell them to leave. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. You know, I was sure that I could find a way to get this ghost crossed over by somebody at that point. And so I left. I left that day. Bobby's still in the room putting in the tongue and groove flooring. I get this call at around 2:30 in the afternoon. I'm in the car line waiting to pick up my kids, and it's Bobby. And he says, I have to leave. I have to leave right now. I've never experienced it. Something about is weird about this house, and I've never experienced anything like this. And the line dropped. And so I tried for almost a half an hour to get a hold of him, to get him to pick up, and he wouldn't. And finally, when I got a hold of him, I said, well, what happened? And he's like, well, it was nothing, but I'd rather be there when you're there. And he never came back. So I asked my friend at work, I said, listen, you know, Bobby never came back, and I have a feeling that something occurred that was paranormal. Would you ask him why he didn't come back? Because I can't get these workers to stay. You know, nobody's coming back except for now this, you know, the one guy that I had. And so he visited her on 4th of July, and he had a couple of beers. So he was a little talkative. And so she asked him, she said, well, what happened at Lynn's house? And he said, oh, Lynn, she's such a nice lady. And he said, but that house is words that I probably can't say on your show, but it starts with an F and it's 6 letters with an ED and then up. He said that house was those 2 words. And he said, I couldn't bring myself to go back. And she said, well, what happened? So he started to tell her that he was putting a piece of the tongue and groove flooring in. He had a trowel, he had a mallet, and a wooden block to kind of tap it in snugly. And that he went to reach for his tools to tap it in, and they weren't there. So he starts scooting his rolly seat over to see if maybe he's rolled over them a little bit and they're not there. And he looks over at the door, and lined up right in a row right at the door are his tools. And he thinks that I've come back and that I'm playing a joke on him. So he gets up, you know, he's kind of freaking out a little bit, you know, but he thought, oh, there, you know, Lynn must have come back and snuck the tools and she's playing a joke on me. So he gets up and he's looking in the hallway, he's calling out in the hallway. And of course I wasn't there, and he's you know, feeling a little funky. And so he turned on his radio. He had a transistor battery operated radio, and he turned on the light, and he sat down. He moved the tools back to where he had them next to him. He sat down on the bench and went to put another piece of tongue and groove flooring in. And all of a sudden the light turns itself off. The radio turns itself off, or maybe it was the other way around. And all of a sudden he hears the tools dragging. And when he looks over, they're lining up right back in front of that door, and he couldn't get out of there fast enough. Wow. That particular day, when he left, because he left in such a hurry, he didn't secure the house. And we had the windows open, and some of the windows did not have screens in them. We were trying to kind of dry out the house and get the air in there to dry the adhesive for the flooring. So I ended up having to go back to the house that night. And I was working a Baylor shift where I would work 12-hour shifts on the weekends. I was working the midnight shift. So this was on a Friday, and I wasn't going to be returning to the house until Tuesday because I would sleep on Monday while my kids were at school. And so I had to go back. So I asked my neighbor to come with me, and I was kind of telling her on the way of me seeing the young man. And I said, do you believe in ghosts? And she's like, oh, hell yeah, I believe in ghosts. And I said, well, I think that there's one in this house. So if we get there and you don't feel comfortable going in with me, then, you know, you don't have to. I'll see if I can get the neighbor across the street to have her husband come over and help me. There was this air conditioner that was in a window that needed to be pulled in order to be able to shut the window. And there was an area that was opened with no screen that bugs could come in. So she said, no, it doesn't bother me. And of course, when we pulled up and got to the house, I was the one having problems with the key in the lock this time. I almost broke the key off trying to get it to turn. And when I finally did, my friend Ellen, she stepped into the foyer and she says, ha, you're not going to let the boogeyman get me, are you? And of course, You don't do that. You don't mock them because they will make you regret it. So, and again, they have an intelligence about them, but she did. So we went upstairs, we pulled in the air conditioner, and I was proud. I kind of wanted to show her around a little bit. And then we stopped in the kitchen where I had purchased these wooden carved Morgan horse heads for my daughter's wild horse theme room to hang her valance over. And Ellen was holding one in each hand, and I could hear this energetic buzzing sound that sounded kind of like a didgeridoo coming up on us. I had heard that sound before when a demon had entered the room once before. So I'm listening, and I'm hearing what's this wah wah kind of sound, and I'm thinking, I don't say anything. And all of a sudden Ellen says, "What's that sound?" And I said, "Do you remember I mentioned that there's a ghost in the house? I just wanted to show you this. We'll leave real quick." She started screaming. She started screaming. She started trying to pull her shirt around. She said, "It burns. It burns. What is it? A spider bite?" And of course, there was no furniture or anything for her to have bumped into or anything like that. Plus, she was a large lady, so she couldn't even reach to connect her own bra. Her boyfriend had to do that. So I lifted up the back of her shirt, and there's this 4.5-inch claw mark diagonal between her shoulder blades underneath her bra strap on her back. And
Wow.
yeah, and being a nurse and a wound care specialist also, the way that it looked like a cat scratch, and it was just welting and starting to bead blood. And anybody will tell you that that is an initial response to a fresh wound. Even if you pick a scab off of a wound, it doesn't have that raised welting thing going on with it first. That never happens again. So it was a fresh wound. And I said to her, I said, "Ellen," I said, "what happened? Did you scratch yourself on the car window or something?" And she started screaming again. It got me again. It got me again. And it got her on her abdomen off to the left-hand side, just a little bit below her belly button, about another 2-inch claw mark. And there was this ectoplasmic wall that was like coming in on us with that didgeridoo sound. And I broke out and called on every name that you could call on God: Jehovah, Yahweh, Buddha, Allah, pick one, Mother Mary. And it started to back off away from us, but it didn't leave. There were two doorways going into the kitchen, one through the breakfast nook, one just past the stair railing that would go into the kitchen. And it started to back into the doorway of the one. And I said to Ellen, I said, "Go to the car. I'll secure the house and I'll be right behind you." And of course, that the lock, which was again a key piece, the doorknob lock, I didn't even want to mess with, because if the key got stuck in there, that means I'd have to stand there. So I only locked the knob lock and shut the door. I figured at that point, if somebody wanted to break in, that house could handle itself. So
Right.
so off we went. And I stayed away from the house for a while because I actually spent a week going through, for the first time, contacting paranormal groups to find somebody to get the things out of the house. I actually had Georgia Paranormal, Father Andrew Calder, who has since passed away. He came out to the house and did a blessing on the house. I had a Presbyterian minister there at the time. And I mean, when you are dealing with something like this, you have to confide in people that know you, that knew you before. So the very first person that I mentioned it to is the facility that I was working in was an Episcopalian based facility. And I had been working, out of the 10 years that I worked there, I had been there 7 years at that point. So the priest knew me. He knew me as a professional person and a good person. So I confided in him and he believed me. And he told me that I needed to contact, that he used to do that sort of thing. He doesn't do it anymore, but that he needed to contact the Catholics. And the funny thing is at one point I went through the entire Yellow Pages trying to get help. And most everybody referred me to the Catholics, and there were a few that did not. And those said to me things like, well, if you were attending our church, you wouldn't be having this problem. I even had one lady, because I had made mention that I was a single mother. So it's not like I had a husband or a man to help me, go through all of this. And she basically insinuated that because I was a single mother that I must be promiscuous or something, and that's the reason why this is happening to me. And I hadn't even been out on a date in 4 years. So that wasn't true either. And I realized that, she didn't know what to do. And even though their slogan is, what would Jesus do? Well, Jesus would have helped me, but the human beings were afraid. And therefore they avoided me. But there were so many things that happened in that house that, I finally, there was an incident with flies too, which I can share with you if you want me to continue.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Nope. I said yes. I already said yes.
We're
Just
hooked.
Just go with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm invested.
Okay. Well, again, a lot of things happened in the house. A lot of things, but as it got towards the closer to the time that I finally, after having the paranormal groups come through, I mean, I had probably 13 different denominations of religion in there. They didn't get them out. I have like 14 witnesses that either had something happen to them or they saw something while they were in the house. So I have a lot of people that witnessed the things, that would sign affidavits and come forward and even vouch in court if they had to, that this occurred. So anyway, I finally had decided that, well, let me just back up a little bit. After the blessing was done, where the Presbyterian minister was there and the Episcopalian priest, it took hours. I mean, he came the night before and set up the cameras. He set up all of the things and did some EVP readings. He verified that, yes, in fact, there were malevolent spirits in the house. And so he came back the next day prepared to do a blessing. And I mean, this took all day long. And I'm mentioning this because it's pertinent to the other part. So then he left. And at that point, I wasn't bringing my children back. We only spent 2 nights in the house. And after the second night of seeing the first demon myself, that I couldn't deny it, and also my son getting bite marks on his legs by something invisible while he was sleeping during the night. And the next morning he has them on his legs. And also my dog not wanting to go into the house for that particular night, I didn't take my children back anymore until I felt something could be done. So after the blessing, I was told that it was okay to take back my children. So I take my kids back. My son brings a friend with him. They were out front climbing in the tree, and my daughter was upstairs in her room, and I was putting gas in the lawnmower. I was going to mow the grass. So all of a sudden, my son's friend, Zach, comes down the descending stairs into the garage, and he's holding his neck and he's wincing. And I'm like, what's the matter? What happened? And he says, I don't know. I got to the bottom. It just burns. He said, something just hit me. And I'm like, hit you? Did Austin hit you with a stick? Did you fall out of the tree? And then he started to retch. Well, after experiencing all of that happening in the house with other people, I knew that he was under demonic attack, and I got him into the car. So I called out to my children and I said, Austin, it's time to go. Do not go into the house and come down the stairs through the garage. Go straight to the car. And my daughter didn't hear me say that part. She just heard me say, it's time to go. So she comes down the descending stairs and gets to the bottom stair. And she goes, ah, and she grabs her ankle. And she literally is crawling out on all fours into the garage. And I'm like, what happened? And she said, I don't know. I got to the bottom of the stairs and it felt like a hot skewer was poked through my ankle, and she could not bear weight. I had to help her get into the car, and we left. So I called the priest after I dropped the kids off at home, and I said, look, those things are not gone. And as a mother, I can't put my children through this. What kind of a mother would I be if my kids come to me in the middle of the night with the normal complaints that kids have of there's something in my closet or there's something under my bed, and in this house, there really is something in their closet and under their bed, might even be in their bed with them. And I can't protect them because we're all huddled into my bed while the covers are being pulled off. So I couldn't do that, to my children. So I told him that, and he said, no, you have to stay in the house and state your ground and command them to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. And I said, look, your house is supposed to be your haven. I cannot be at peace ever being in that house. What would happen if I had a Thanksgiving dinner with extended family over and I see a piece of paper blow off and a demon walk through because I could see them, a demon walk through my house, and I stand up at my table and I start pointing and commanding this thing to get out of my house in the name of Jesus Christ. How many of my guests do you think are going to stay for dessert? And not only that, invite me to their house. I may, be bringing more than chocolate cake. So they're not going to want me over at their house either. So I told them that I could not do it. And so finally I put the house up for sale by owner. And I got multiple calls, but this one call in particular from this young couple, the wife had grown up in the area. She wanted to raise her children in the same neighborhood that she grew up in a similar designed house. And they'd made plans while I was in the house. I made plans with her to come to that, which was a mistake because they could hear everything. So the very next day, the family was supposed to come. They have 3 children and the husband and wife, and they were supposed to come at a certain time. And so I had my mom and I, we went to the house to kind of do some stage play. The house was empty. It was spotless. There was no food, no garbage. Everything was clean, no cleaning rags. Nothing was left in the house. And as we're walking up the sidewalk to the double entry doors, my mom says to me, she says, Lynn, did you tint the windows? And I'm like, no, why? And I looked upstairs to the upper level windows and they were black. I mean, you couldn't even see the division of the vertical blinds, but I thought, well, maybe the vertical blinds got left open and that's why I can't see the division. And then I looked at the lower level windows and there were flies. There were so many flies on those windows that when I looked back up, it was almost like 3D because now I could see them moving. And my mother and I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We expected to be swarmed by these flies when we went into the house, but we weren't. All of the flies were plastered to the windows because they wanted out. And the thing about these flies is that they were full-grown flies. There were no hatchlings, no maggots, no evidence of anything like that. And they had been in the house long enough that they had pooped all around the window, the windows that they were covering, all around the molding around the windows. There were orangey black speckles of excrement all over them. And there was one window in the breakfast nook area that had 3 panels, and I didn't realize that the crank was broken so they wouldn't open. But in addition to that, they were painted shut from the outside, and the screen was in good condition, but there were flies between that screen and the panes, and I have no idea how they could have even got in there. So I had to take the screens off and usher them into the house, and we had the front kitchen windows open, took the screens off to usher them out before those people would come. So in the interim, the people had called to reschedule, and I didn't realize it until finally time passed and I went and checked my phone. So, and I was relieved because I thought, God, what are you going to do if these people pull up and hear all these flies in the house?
Right.
And there was nothing to draw them into the house. Nothing. There was no odor, no food, nothing. So I called them on the way home. This time I was in my car, and they made arrangements to come the next day. And so my mom and I, this time, we went 2 hours early to make sure that everything was okay. And it was fine. Everything was fine. No flies. Everything was clean. It was the way that, we had left it. And the people came over and they brought 2 of their 3 children. And of course, the kids are running through the house just like mine did, picking out their bedrooms. And again, nobody wanted the small bedroom upstairs. So they asked if they could go downstairs. And I'm like, well, sure, go ahead. And lo and behold, They were back up in about 5 minutes. And the little girl's eyes were like a deer in headlights. And she says, I'll take the room upstairs. Johnny can have the creepy room downstairs. Johnny was the kid that wasn't with them. So I realized in that moment as a mother that I couldn't bring myself to sell the house to people with children because the children were seeing them, you know. So it just, oh my gosh. So I had this couple from Florida contact me. They were a retired couple. They were moving up to retire from Florida, and it was a cash buy. So, you know, we were in the house signing papers and planning to, you know, make our move to go, you know, to the attorney and finish everything up. And we were coming down the stairs from the upper level, and I exited the double entry doors first. And I hear the wife saying to the husband, why did you push me? And he's like, I didn't push you. And she said, yes, you did. And he said, I'm 3 steps back. I can't even, you know, reach you to push you. And she said, well, I don't know what happened, but I knew what happened because I knew about the wolf thing that would run the stairs. And so when they came out, in a good conscience, I couldn't, even though I understood why the people sold the house to me, and that was an interesting thing too. That closing was weird, but I understood why they did it because I also was in a situation where now I'm paying for 2 places to live and I can't afford it. I understood, but I couldn't bring myself to do it to someone else. So when they came out, I said to them, I said, you know, do you believe in ghosts? And they both immediately cut me off. No, we are Baptists. We don't believe in those sorts of things. We don't discuss those sorts of things. We don't entertain those
All right,
sorts
here you
of
go.
things. Yep. Yeah. And I
See you later.
yeah, I'm like, well, I tried, but you know, but the thing was, is I did try. I would have told them the truth if they had let me, but they weren't interested. And lo and behold, they did move out 6 months later, or at least the house was, yeah. So, and that's in the next book. That goes into the next book that they ended up moving 2 months later. So, I mean, 6 months later.
Wow.
I don't mean to stop you here. This is great, but unfortunately we're at our time. And this is the one of the most enthralling conversations
I've ever been super interesting. This is definitely like A+ for our show.
I might not even I texted Drew off here and I was like, this is gold. Like it's great.
Thank you.
So
we definitely well no, not I don't mean gold like, oh, this is, we got to get this from you. I just mean this is conversation we don't normally have, like stuff that's like this deep, stuff like that, like Bigfoot, cryptids, like this is good stuff. And that,
well,
so
I can
we'll
talk
definitely
about that stuff too, but
I'm sure you can. Well, unfortunately, we have another guest lined up.
Okay.
Here,
what I would like to do, though,
talk again for sure.
Definitely, let's have you back on. Let's do a part 2.
I would love to
pick up right where you left off, and I have so many other questions, even just about your field of nursing and stuff. So
yeah, we didn't.
Let's absolutely.
Well, you might need a second, third, and fourth. So yeah, it usually goes into segments. But it would be an honor to come back on.
We could do segment podcast for sure.
Awesome. So with the final moment that we have here, I do have all of the stuff that you sent me to include in show notes. But real quick, go ahead and take a moment to promote, tell everybody where they can find you, find your books. And after that, I'll hit the also very loud outro.
Okay. Also, everybody, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. Woohoo! So anyway, you can get a hold of me at www.lynnmonet.com. That is my website. It does lead into an email where you can reach me if you're having problems in your house. And I can try to get you some help with that, as well as you can purchase my books and I'll sign them. My books are also out on Amazon. Not all of them. I'm kind of shying away from Amazon with my new books because of, well, we won't go there. But you can get them. If you're out of the country, it would probably be better for you to buy them from Amazon because the shipping is much less than what I could afford to do for you. But on my site, the books are a little bit less expensive and I can customize them for you. I'm also Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, X, everywhere that way too. And I'm on Journey Through the Gate, with Cisco on a paranormal podcast the last Sunday of every month. I co-host that. I'm going to be restarting my own podcast coming up, I'm hoping in June. I've been talking to Katie Turner about that, and I'll be that'll be posted on my website as well when that occurs. And then I'll have you on my show.
Awesome. That would be fantastic. We love doing stuff like that.
I've never been on shows before.
Well, I'll be dragging you on my show then.
All right. Very cool. Everybody check all the stuff out. These books sound incredible. Just the experiences, just the hour of talking about it, man. It blows my mind. But I want to thank you again for coming on, and I will go ahead and give you that warning. This might hurt your ears because I made it super loud.
No, the outro is okay. It's not as bad as the intro.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit the outro, and we will have Lynn back again in the future for anybody who is as enthralled by this conversation as we were.
We're reaching the end. Can't you feel that groove? Thanks for tuning in. We're in the sky moon. From the start till now, we've been having a blast. So put on your dancing shoes. It's time to skate fast. We've got a request, a little favor to ask. If you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up and clap. Subscribe to our channel. Join the Sky Nation. We'll keep spreading the rhythm. Worldwide sensation. Thanks for tuning in. It means the world to us. Like and subscribe. Show your love and don't fuss. Check us out on YouTube. We're ready to roll. Skate with us forever. Straight to your soul.
Thanks for squatching, everybody.